what he's breaking down is he gonna even be specific enough to point out the ones that might have one characteristic but don't have the other characteristics. He said, no, it got to do it all. So he said, as the camel and the hare and the coney, for they chew the cud, so they got a good characteristic on that side of the fence, but divide not the hoof, they still unclean. And he's telling you, point blank, don't eat it, it's unclean. You don't have to try to figure it out. I wonder what God's trying to tell me. Therefore, they are unclean unto you. Verse 8, this is the big one that people want to eat at all costs. Go ahead.
And the swine, because it divideth the hoof, yet cheweth not the cud, it is unclean unto you.
And the swine, he said, because it divides. Oh, Moses was stupid. That was a Mosaic. He didn't really, he didn't know. Look, Moses didn't even instigate that. God spoke those words. He gave a lot of stuff to Moses to get to the people, but he spoke it. But even before Moses' time, this was known to the true servants of God. True servant of God back here, the only one in his family that made it through the flood, of course he knew about this. Because he was a true servant of God. No coincidence. And he wasn't eating no unclean stuff. God even directed him home how to carry him on the ark. 7:1, go ahead.
And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation.
See, Noah was righteous. That's the key. And righteous according to what God say is right. When it comes to clean and unclean, it need to be according to God's standards. So the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. See, he knew how to be righteous. Even he knew what the Lord later told Moses and Israel. It wasn't even no Israel here. It wasn't no nations here. It was just all people, good or bad. Go ahead, verse 2.
Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female.
Yeah, why don't y'all put a sign up on it, because my phone is blowing up. Put a sign on the screen, say it's a problem with the volume, y'all working on it or something. Because these people texting like 40 going north, as he say. He said, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean. Notice, in Noah's day, it was clean and not clean. Mm-hmm. Way before Moses. Moses wasn't even born. So how you going to attribute that to Moses? Say that's the Mosaic law. God is around throughout all generations. So that's telling you who law it is. The same law that the Lord gave to Moses to get to Israel, he had already gave it to Noah concerning even the ark to save the animals. He said, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and what?
And of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female.
Okay, so now, he said, and the beasts that are not clean by two. So he only took two. He took 7 of the clean ones, 7 males and 7 females, but he didn't need no extra of the unclean, brothers and sisters, because wasn't nothing to do with them except because they good for something. They just ain't good to be eaten, and God didn't have man sacrificing them to him or none of that. But they good for something because God made them. So he wanted to make sure the species survived, but he didn't need no extras for no other purpose, just to make the species survive. So he said in verse 2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Only 2 are the ones not clean. Then it go, just like in Deuteronomy we read, where he gave you the clean and unclean among the beasts. Then he went to the fish. Then he went to the fowl that fly, the birds that fly in the air. He gave you that. And same thing with Noah, verse 3.
Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth.
See, most people have always heard, even little kids sing songs, they went on the ark all 2 by 2, all 2 by 2. Not actually. The unclean went 2 by 2. That shows you people not telling people what's in the Bible. I remember I read this to a guy because he was trying to make an excuse why you had to do it. He said, well, ain't nothing wrong with eating pork now, It was just for back then. And he really was trying to tell them to stay away from swine like people. I said, oh, that's what he was trying to tell Moses. Yeah, he was trying to tell them, just don't be around swine like people. I said, okay, even though you can't read it. I'm going to show you. And I came back and read this to him. He didn't know this was in the Bible because he was one of the ones talking about them other books. Say, I got to get my other books. I can really show you that because you can't show me that out the Bible, what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I need my other books. I said, yeah, let me show you something else in this book. And I read Genesis 7 and his eyes blew up. He didn't know that was in the Bible. I said, what was the purpose back here? Swine like people's on the ark? He was messed up. So the Lord then had this, but now, Matthew 15, because this is where he start, again, people try to get to the New Testament, and they try to make it as if something changed. That's where the big problem come in at. And this is one of the favors they used to use. They said, oh, see, no, you. Now, we read point blank, God said, don't eat swine. Don't eat the unclean. It's unclean. And people will give you lies, make like the Bible is telling you something contradictory, contradicting itself. So they read this, Matthew 15:1. Let's see what it's talking about at the beginning, though. Go ahead.
Then came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, Why do thy disciples transgress the traditions of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? For God
now this is what they asking Jesus. This is what this is about. This is a topic of discussion here. It don't have nothing to do with what we just read in Deuteronomy 14. We read 20 verses. It was all geared toward telling you not to eat certain animals, fish, or even birds. Then we read Genesis 7 where Noah took the animals on the ark to save them, but he took them according to clean and unclean. He took more clean than unclean because he didn't have no other use for the unclean except to repopulate. So that was talking about clean and unclean animals and ones we shouldn't eat. This is talking about something totally different, and you can't mix the two and try to come up with a new doctrine. Even though you might try to, you can get a verse here and you try to read something into it, you can't do that with the word. You got to deal with the word here a little, there a little, line upon line. So if it would change, why God's law would change, why he would tell you point blank, don't eat it today and then it's okay to eat it tomorrow, don't make no sense. But even if it would change, you need to have concrete proof. You can't have just a glimpse of something. Oh, yeah, see, that means we can eat anything. Now, did it say that? Just like this. This said they came to Jesus, some religious hypocrites, and I can call them hypocrites because Jesus called them that, which were of Jerusalem, the scribes and the Pharisees, and they said in verse 2, why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders, for they wash not their hands when they eat bread? So that is what we're talking about. We're talking about these people and their tradition. And Jesus said what again at verse 3?
But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition?
See, now, Jesus turned around and said, to the contrary, you telling me about your tradition, eat when I'm washing hands, that's what it was. They made that a religious law. And they got on Jesus about it. You know it's something when you're getting on God. You know you really don't know what's going on. You're getting on God. You're going to tell him something. And so he turned around and told them something. He said, yeah, why do you transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? And he gave him another one. See, he didn't hit them exactly what they was talking about. He gave him another. He went somewhere else with them as an example. But the bottom line, we just read out of the Bible the commandment of God concerning eating unclean animals. Don't eat them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's got to be important if it's the commandment of God, and we read it. So people doing the same thing they're going to transgress the commandment of God by their tradition. Oh, we can eat it now. Just pray over it. That's your tradition. That's not what he said. So he said, why do you transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? Verse 4, go ahead.
For God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift by whatsoever thou might be profited by me, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free.
See, now, he hit him with the fifth commandment, honor your mother and father. And he said, God commanded you that, but you got an excuse to get around it. You say, oh, if I take care of them, I ain't really got to honor them. And you could curse them out. And it's okay because of your loophole that you have invented. That's the same thing when it comes to eating unclean stuff. You have invented a loophole. It's not in the Bible. And this is one of the ones they try to use as a loophole when this don't have nothing to do with unclean food or animals, brother and sister. The topic of discussion was their tradition, which is really what's important. It was their man-made tradition. And what was the tradition? Didn't have nothing to do with eating food. It had something to do with eating with unwashed hands. Unwashed hands. That's what the tradition was. So we can't make this something else. He say, but you disregard what God said. And did you read 6?
I'm in the middle of it.
Okay, in verse 6, he gonna tell them, you don't do what the commandment say and honor your mother and father, and what? Go ahead.
Thus have ye made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition.
See, that's what they doing to this day. They was doing it then, they doing it now. Made the commandment of God of none effect. It don't mean nothing no more. God said it, he might as well not have said it. That's why I know why he said in, I think, Jeremiah 8, somewhere up in there, he said that God said, he said, the law is in vain that I gave. He said, the writer who wrote is in vain. Even the pen that he used is in vain. Because ain't nobody listening. Same thing with this topic of discussion. Thus have you made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. See, they tried to hit him with some tradition. Jesus took it back to the commandments of God. Go ahead, 7.
Ye hypocrites. Well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, this people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. See, their heart is far from you. You can praise them, you can sing to them, but you don't know what he wants and not doing it. Go ahead. But in vain they do worship me. You mean you could possibly be worshiping God in vain? That's a scary thought. That means you got to make sure you got it right. See, that goes into not eating the wrong things spiritually. See, but this is just concrete. God said, don't eat certain things. All you got to do is believe him at his word and do it. Even if you're not sure, it's better to be safe than sorry. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. See, that's the other side of the lesson. You can't eat this up, the commandments of men. You can't eat this up, spiritually speaking. But go ahead, we're going to get to that. Go ahead. Verse 10. And he called the multitude and said unto them, hear and understand. Not that which goeth into the mouth defileth the man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth the man. Okay, now this is where they get off track at. See, they come in, they want to read straight to this. They don't want to get the history of what it's really talking about. We know it's about eating with unwashed hands. And we know it's about eating with unwashed hands was a man-made tradition. He ain't doing away with God's commandments. In this passage, he's upholding God's commandments. He ain't doing away with God's commandments. That ain't even on the table for this debate or discussion. In Jesus' mind, he wasn't even mentioning God's commandments of you not eating swine. He wasn't even thinking of that. That wasn't even on the table at all. But he did say, not that which goeth into the mouth defileth the man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. So he took it there so people say, see, well, it don't matter what goes in the mouth. Now, that's predicated on the fact that it's not contrary to God's law. That's when it matters. It will matter. See, what they was talking about wasn't breaking God's law. Breaking God's law is sin. That always matters.
Go ahead. Verse 12.
Then came his disciples and said unto him, knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard this saying? But he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch.
See, now he's saying a whole lot of stuff. He's telling you how messed up these people with their man-made traditions are. He said they blind leaders of the blind. When the blind lead the blind, they both end up in the hole somewhere. Go ahead, verse 15. But he's doing a lot of talking, and people going to come out of here and grab what they want and make something out of it. Go ahead, 15.
Then answered Peter and said unto him, declare unto us this parable.
See, Peter then was even shocked that Jesus blasted the tradition of the Pharisees, that he wasn't going along, because everybody thought if they said it, it must have been right. And Jesus blasted their tradition. And even his disciples were like, well, break this down for us then. So, we ain't got to worry about that, huh? He said, now notice, Peter, one of his 12 disciples was there. Again, we ain't talked about no swine or no unclean animals yet in this chapter. But Peter said, then answered Peter and said unto him, declare unto us this parable. So Jesus is going to reiterate it one more time, 16.
And Jesus said, are ye also yet without understanding?
Are ye yet without understanding? Go ahead.
Do not ye yet understand that whatsoever entereth in at the mouth goeth into the belly and is cast out into the draught?
See, somebody might read that. They say, see, whatever go in the mouth, it come out the draught. Yeah, it do. And if you ain't breaking God's law, when you put it in your mouth, you ain't got no problem. But when you breaking God's law, that's your problem right there. God told you don't do it. But again, Jesus upholding the law of God. So he ain't saying it's okay to go eat swine. Neither did Peter, who is right here with them, get that out of that. Peter didn't get this out of this. So we 2,000 years later, we going to try to get it out of this. And Peter, who asked him the question, break this down for me, Lord. He didn't get it out of it. You know how we know? Because he still didn't eat nothing unclean. And he going to say that years later. Many years later, which we're going to read in Acts 10, Peter is going to tell you he don't eat nothing. He never ate nothing common or unclean. So he didn't get this out of this today in Matthew 15 and say, oh, that means we can eat the pork chop sandwich and we can do. No, he didn't get that. He knew better. He got what the message was, that they tradition of eating with unwashed hands don't defile you. That's what the message was. That ain't going to mess you up. Eating with unwashed hands will not defile you. That's what they came to Jesus about. Now, if Jesus and his disciples would have been eating pork, God forbid, because they wouldn't have did it. But if they would have been sitting up there eating pork and the Pharisees came to him, hey, Jesus couldn't uphold the law of God if he was breaking it. But he upheld the law. But go ahead, verse 18.
But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man.
Right. And it's coming out of your heart is evil when you're going to break God's law. When God told you and you say, oh, you ain't got to do it no more. That's an evil thought right there. Go ahead.
For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts.
Evil thoughts. Go ahead.
Murders.
And what else?
Adultery.
All contrary to his law.
Mm-hmm.
So we read in Deuteronomy, he said, you supposed to be a holy people, don't eat certain things. That's his law. Go ahead.
Fornication, thefts, false witness, and blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. But to eat with unwashed hands defileth not a man.
But to eat with unwashed hands defileth not a man. We didn't read to eat pork don't defile you, do we? Mm-mm. To eat catfish don't defile you. You can just eat anything now. We didn't read none of that. But again, people take this out of context. See, we can eat anything now according to this. That's not what he's talking about. It wasn't even on the table for debate. Acts 10. Acts 10. And we're going to pick it up at verse 1. This is another favorite that people used to like to use. Acts 10 and 1. Okay, go ahead.
There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band.
Okay, now this is what this story is about. It's about this centurion, this Roman soldier, and he really was a Roman. He's Italian. And what about him? Verse 2.
A devout man, and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always.
See, he really feared God. He was a devout man, and he helped Israel out because he wasn't Israel. He was an Italian, and he prayed to God. And finally something happened. Verse 3.
He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming to him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. And now send men into Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter.
Okay, now this is years later from Acts 15. Years later. Because in Jesus' time, Jesus told the disciples, don't even deal with the Gentiles or the Samaritans, only go to the lost sheep of Israel. He told them that in Matthew 10. But time had passed. Jesus had died and resurrected and went back to heaven, been gone years now by this time. And here comes a vision that this Italian had on how to get some more understanding, because he was really seeking God. But God worked through Israel. So the angel came and didn't tell him what to do on how to serve God or what you need to follow. The angel told him you call for Peter. Now Peter, mind you, was the one in Acts 15 when Jesus was talking about eating with unwashed hands don't mean nothing. That's man-made tradition. He was right there with Jesus. So again, if that meant in Acts 15 you could eat anything, now Peter would have known it. He was standing right there. He wouldn't have had no problem eating it if that's the case. But we know better. See, and this is not about eating nothing. This is about Cornelius. But go ahead. What verse yet?
Verse 6. He lodgeth with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do.
See, the angel's still talking to Cornelius. He said, look, you need to call for Peter, Simon Peter. He told him where he was at, and he going to preach to you. He going to tell you what you need to do. Go ahead.
And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called two of his household servants, and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and a certain vessel descending unto him, and as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat.
Okay, so now this is where people get this out of context, because Peter saw a vision. Now, again, the story is not about eating no food. That's getting ready to come into play to give him a message, but it's not about eating no food. The story is about Cornelius the Italian. And Cornelius is in the process of sending some men to Peter. So what do the Lord got to do, being that this is a Gentile coming to Peter, and Peter in no way, no how is going to go preach to no Gentile? The Lord had to get Peter ready for this. That's what the Lord got to do. So the Lord know how to prep you for something. So while the people going to come to Peter, it took a while to get there, Peter ended up in a trance. And he was hungry at the time. And he would have eaten, but he got into this trance. He would have went and got something to eat. And he went into this trance, and then he heard a voice that told him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Now, he is hungry. Now, again, this is just a vision. This ain't nothing that he can eat anyway. It said a sheet came down from heaven of all kind of beasts. Beasts like we saw in Deuteronomy 14 that the Lord told you not to eat. But again, it's animals on the thing, so he ain't getting ready to eat nothing right then anyway. That's what he would have to do to eat it. He would have to kill an animal and do a whole lot of stuff, which that ain't going to happen for lunch. So it ain't about him eating nothing physically, brother and sister. He couldn't eat it if he wanted to right then. He might have could have killed it and ate it tomorrow, but he got to go get something to eat downstairs in the house if he want to eat right now. That's why it's a message. He knew better than to think it meant for him to get up and start eating something unclean anyway. But now read verse 13 again.
And there came a voice to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat.
Now a voice come out of nowhere to you and tell you to rise and do something. It seemed like quite naturally, whatever that voice said, you don't see nobody, you're going to get up and do it. Okay, well, I guess that got to be right, because this got to be coming from God. I hear a voice, I don't see nobody. I'm seeing this stuff that came out of nowhere in front of my face. If the voice telling me to do something, I shouldn't have no problem with that. Unless you know God said don't do it. So what Peter said, 14.
But Peter said, not so, Lord.
Now he talking back to the Lord. The Lord had told him to do something, and Peter said, not so, Lord. A voice that's coming out of nowhere. He got enough boldness to say, not so, Lord, because he could stand on what he know God has said, what we read in Deuteronomy. He can take that to the bank. He said, not so, Lord. Why?
For I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean.
Never, ever, ever. Peter said, I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Told you they kept the dietary law, brothers and sisters. Peter is admitting he kept the dietary law. Even after Matthew 15, he did not stop keeping the dietary law. He did not eat what the Lord said don't eat. That just was a no-brainer for Israel, period. That's why any scholar tell you, none of them ate no pork. Jesus did never eat a piece of pork, brothers and sisters. If you're going to be like Jesus, you should just take that to heart. He didn't eat no pork. Wasn't no scholar alive tell you he did. Peter is making it plain. Now here's a person that's with Jesus, and he still ain't eating nothing unclean. He letting it be known years later. I have never eaten anything common or unclean. Go ahead, verse 15.
And the voice spake unto him again the second time. What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common.
See? Now, this is where people want to stop here and get this verse and say, see, but God said it's okay now. It's okay to eat anything. Look, this is not about the food. Peter told you his understanding pertaining to the food. He ain't never ate nothing common or unclean. But it's not about the food. Matter of fact, we started at the beginning. We know what it's about, brothers and sisters. It's about Cornelius. That's what it's about. Go ahead.
This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven.
Now, in other words, because some people have said, oh, Peter ate some stuff that he wasn't supposed, that they didn't usually eat. He ate it. I said, no, he didn't eat nothing. It was just a vision. I had to tell people that. They don't even know where it is in the Bible. They listen to people. See, enough just listening to some preacher tell you something, you got to get it for yourself. That's why the lesson is beware of the lies. They lying to us telling us we can eat anything. And they lying to us telling us we don't have to do what God say, period. So Peter didn't eat nothing. It happened 3 times. They repeated that scenario. Peter kept saying, not so, Lord. I ain't never ate nothing common or unclean. I ain't getting ready to eat nothing. I know this is something else. And he didn't do it. The vessel went back into heaven. Go ahead.
Now while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean.
Oh, he didn't think it meant I can get me a pork chop sandwich now. He was doubting in himself. I wonder what is the Lord trying to tell me? Because this is bona fide vision. I mean, all this stuff happening. You know, this is quite a midday wake-up call, right? Mm-hmm. You're in the middle of your day, all of a sudden some stuff drop out the sky, and you hear a voice say, rise and eat. So, quite naturally, the Lord has got Peter's attention. Mm-hmm. He got Peter's attention big time. But Peter didn't assume. He knew it didn't mean he could eat anything. He knew better than that. He rebuked the vision. Not so, Lord. Can't go that way. So he said, now while Peter thought in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, while he thinking about the vision, what happened?
Behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate.
Well, after all, that's what this is about, right? Mm-hmm. That's what all this is about, brothers and sisters. It's about Cornelius, the Italian. Lord got his attention, and he is going to look at this situation totally different from the way he would have looked at it if had not he had that vision. He's going to look at it totally different. Go ahead.
And called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, would lodge there.
See, the Lord went through all this trouble. That let you know this was a bona fide Italian. Mm-hmm. Because some Israelites try to say, oh, no, the word is just for Israel. It ain't for the other nations. The Lord going to kill all the other nations, which is ludicrous. It's not just for his word is just for Israel. I said, what about Cornelius? Well, he really wasn't Italian. He just lived in Italy. He was an Israelite. He wasn't an Israelite. Why would the Lord have to go through all this trouble to get Peter to preach to an Israelite? And that's who Jesus said go preach to in the first place, the lost sheep of Israel, right? He said go preach to them. That was a given. Peter wouldn't have had no problem preaching to a lost Israelite. But an Italian, that's a whole nother story. Mm-hmm. So they knocking on the door, boop, boop, boop. Go ahead.
While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise, therefore, and get thee down and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them.
See, now while he thinking, right at the moment, as he done had this vision and he's still thinking on this vision, the Spirit spoke to him and gave him the answer. He said, look, quit doubting about this. 3 men knocking on the door for you. Go down there and you go with them doubting nothing. Now, Peter probably still don't get it that they going to be Gentiles, but he going to get it when he get down there to the door. Go ahead.
Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius and said, behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come?
Go ahead.
And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews.
See, because he wasn't a Jew, but he had a good report among the Jews, because he was an Italian. Go ahead.
Was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee into his house, and to hear words of thee.
See, he said he was warned by an holy angel to call for you. And see, they don't know Peter just had a vision that's going to make him more receptive to this situation. Go ahead.
Then called he them in, and lodged them. And on the morrow, Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him.
He went with them. Go ahead.
And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and had called together his kinsmen and their friends.
See, Cornelius had a house full of people there, because he said, these people got the word, and I want to get it, and y'all need to get it too. He got a house full of people there. His people, family and friends, Italians, Gentiles. Go ahead.
And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshiped him.
See, Cornelius said, these guys right here got the true word of God. And he went so far, he bowed down and worshiped Peter. You know, they say Peter was the first pope, but he didn't accept the bowing down too. But go ahead, that's another lesson.
But Peter took him up, saying, stand up. I myself also am a man.
See, he didn't let him do that. He said, no, I'll get up. I'm a man just like you. But I do got to say something. Go ahead.
And as he talked with them, he went in and found many that were come together.
See, he found many that come together, and this the first thing come out of his mouth when he started preaching to them. What? 28.
And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation.
And you going to tell me Cornelius wasn't of another nation? Somebody has lost it. That's so you when you start believing a lie and you just got to back it up, it don't even make no sense at all. You can't prove that at gunpoint. But his brother saying, I had a brother arguing with me saying, no, you know, because they got it in their mind. Somebody told them the word is just for Israel. So now, whenever it looked like the Lord was preaching somebody other than Israel, you got to fix that. Can't fix it, though. You got to fix your doctrine. That's what needs fixing. He said unto them, you know how it's an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. And we know what nation. He was an Italian. Mm-hmm. But what happened in the vision? Go ahead.
But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean.
See, that's the moral of the story. Don't have nothing to do with, we ain't read about eating pork. It's okay to eat pork or nothing. It's okay to eat the unclean stuff. We ain't read about that. It was a vision to get the word out to the Gentiles. That's what it was. Now, go to Romans 14. This is one of the late favorites. People stumble across this one, so they throwing it in. But anytime when you got the word of God saying something point blank direct, like it said in Deuteronomy, we even saw they was clean and unclean going on the ark. Anytime you got that, the Lord ain't going to contradict himself.
Never did.
So when it's something that seems like it is, you just don't understand it. Just like what we just read. That was about Cornelius. What we read in Matthew 15, that was about eating with unwashing hands. And it didn't say, I reversed the dietary law. You can eat anything now. Why wasn't Peter eating anything if that was the case? Why he going to rebuke the vision and say, 14:1. Go ahead.
Him that is weak in faith, receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. For one believeth that he may eat all things. Another who is weak eateth herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not. And let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth.
Okay, so now people say, oh, see, brother, we can eat anything. And you can't judge me for eating, because if I just want to eat some pork, it's okay. This is not what he's talking about. Again, none of these people didn't eat pork. Paul didn't eat pork. Peter just said he never ate nothing common or unclean. He just said that. So again, that wasn't even on the table for discussion. That wasn't even debatable. This don't have nothing to do with the dietary law. This got something to do with personal preference, brothers and sisters. That's all it is. It got something to do with personal preference, and we shouldn't judge one another on personal preference that don't have nothing to do with breaking God's law. Personal preference is if somebody, in this case, want to be a vegetarian, they not hurting God by being a vegetarian. By the same token, being that I know God says certain animals I can eat, if somebody else don't want to be a vegetarian and eat the clean animals, then the vegetarian can't get mad at him. That's what he's saying. Him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. Verse 2, for one believeth that he may eat all things. Another who is weak eateth herbs. See, he said all things. He ain't dealing with unclean stuff. That was understood. He ain't even got to put that in there.
Yeah.
All things except stuff that's unclean. No, he ain't got to say that. That's understood. Just like even if it didn't matter what you eat or what you don't eat, they wouldn't have told the Gentiles in Acts 15. They even gave them that restriction. They said don't eat stuff with blood, don't eat things strangled. See, if the dietary law was thrown out, they wouldn't have brought it in the New Testament telling them don't eat certain things. Because it's still good to this day. It's just lies that people giving us, telling us it's okay. So he said, read verse 3 again.
Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not.
See, if I'm eating meat, I shouldn't hate nobody that's want to be a vegetarian. That's their preference. That's up to them. That's their prerogative. If they not offending God by being a vegetarian, I'm not offending God by eating a hamburger. So I can't get mad at them. They can't get mad at me. See, you can't put your personal preference on nobody. Only thing you can do is tell them what the Lord say. When you cross that, then you're dealing with God's commandments. And Jesus upheld that. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for what?
For God hath received him.
Right, go ahead.
Who art thou that judges another man's servant? Mm-hmm. To his own master he standeth or falleth. Mm-hmm. Yet he shall be holding up, for God is able to make him stand.
See? So it's just like we have a fast we do every month. We don't tell because God didn't command it. That's just something that we choose to do. We ain't telling nobody that you got to do that. Mm-mm. We ain't telling you got to do it. It's volunteer. Because God didn't say you got to do it. He said it's good to fast, and we doing it jointly once a month, but it ain't nothing that we can mandate. And that's what he's talking about. Skip down to verse 14. Go ahead.
I know and am persuaded by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself.
See, they like to read this. They say, see, it ain't nothing unclean of itself. That's if God didn't say it was unclean, quite naturally. That's if God didn't say it was unclean. But what?
But to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean.
See, to him that esteemeth it unclean, it's unclean. He's talking about personal preference still. Because if that's the case, if you say, well, it's nothing unclean, well, when your aunt die, eat her. You know, and that's unclean of itself. You say, oh, that's unclean. Right. So again, this is just when it's not unclean, when God hasn't said it's unclean. You know, God said fornication is unclean. It don't matter whether I esteem that unclean or not. God said it's unclean. So, but when it ain't nothing that God said, then hey, that's personal preference. That's all he's dealing with. But again, it's nothing concrete. Again, people use these couple of verses in the New Testament, try to do away with what's in the Old Testament. And Jesus said he didn't come to do away with none of it. He didn't come to destroy the law of the prophets. One jot or one tittle not going to pass till it's all over with. Now, go to 1 Timothy 4. This was the hands down phase